My brother got married on a Saturday in June outdoor ceremony, string lights, a white fabric arch, 40 guests who drove in from 3 counties. I wasn't one of them. I found out about the wedding the same way I found out about most things in my family, last and by accident. A social media post from someone's aunt with the caption, "Beautiful day for a beautiful couple." The venue was a 4-bedroom house with a wraparound driveway and a maple tree in the backyard. I'd been to that house exactly once before the wedding, the day I bought it. Because my name, not my brother's, was the only name on the deed, and I hadn't transferred it yet. And he knew that. He knew that when he planned the wedding there. He knew that when he set up the chairs in that backyard. He knew that when he walked his bride under that arch, and he made a choice. So I made one too. What happened between those 2 choices ended a marriage before the flowers wilted. My name is Renata Voss. I'm 34. I'm a forensic accountant in Greenville, South Carolina, which means I spend my professional life finding the numbers people tried to hide. I'm good at it. I've always been good at it. I grew up in a family that taught me numbers matter more than feelings, not because anyone said that out loud, but because feelings were abundant and money was not, and feelings didn't keep the electricity on. My mother, Cecile, died 11 years ago. Ovarian cancer. She was 50 years old, and she handled the diagnosis the same way she handled everything. Quietly, practically, with a list. She made arrangements, she organized her papers, she sat me down 3 weeks before the end and told me 2 things. First, the life insurance policy is in the green binder, second shelf. Second, watch over your brother. My brother Lucas was 21. He was the kind of person who could walk into any room and immediately become the most interesting person in it. Magnetic, funny, disarmingly warm. He had our mother's laugh and our father's confidence and none of either person's follow-through. My father Gerd left when I was 16. Not dramatically. He didn't slam doors or leave a note. He just gradually disappeared, like a photograph left in sunlight. Present enough to recognize, but fading by degrees, until one Tuesday he wasn't at dinner and then wasn't at breakfast and then his truck wasn't in the driveway. And my mother said, "Your father needs some time," and that time lasted the rest of her life. So when she died, it was me and Lucas. And Lucas needed someone to be the Cecile of the situation. I became the Cecile of the situation. Here's what that looked like in practice. I was 23 and working as a junior accountant at a firm in Greenville, making $41,000 a year before taxes. Lucas was in community college studying something he described as media communications and what I would describe as filming skateboard videos and attending class sporadically. Every month, without fail, a text. "Hey, a little behind this month." A little behind meant rent plus utilities plus the payment on a motorcycle he'd bought without discussing it with anyone, plus whatever the current emergency was, a parking ticket, a broken phone, a medical bill from the time he jumped off a roof at a party and sprained both ankles. I sent it every time. I told myself it was temporary, that Lucas just needed time to find his footing, that the investment would pay off once he stabilized. What I didn't understand, what takes years to understand, is that you cannot build someone's footing for them. The moment you do, the ground you've laid becomes the only ground they know. They stop learning to balance because they never have to. Lucas didn't stabilize. Lucas cycled. Every job ended with a variation of the same story. Management didn't respect him, or the hours were unreasonable, or the opportunity wasn't what they'd promised. He was never wrong. The situation was always wrong, and I was always there with a bridge loan and a listening ear, which meant he never had to sit in the wreckage long enough to understand how he'd built it. 8 years. I did this for 8 years. And then Lucas lost 2 things in the same month, his job at a logistics company and his apartment, and he called me at 10:30 on a Thursday night from a gas station parking lot and said, "I don't have anywhere to go, Ren. I want to be clear about what I did next, because I want you to understand the specific texture of my stupidity. I didn't give Lucas money for a deposit on a new place. I didn't co-sign a lease. I bought him a house. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, backyard with a maple tree, in a neighborhood in Laurel Hill where the streets are named after birds and the yards are kept up and the neighbors wave to each other. Listed at $810,000. I got it for $783,000. I put down $156,000. That money took 9 years to save. I drove the same car for 7 of those years, a 2015 Corolla with a windshield crack I kept meaning to fix and never did. I brought my lunch to work every single day. I took 1 vacation in 9 years, a 4-day trip to Asheville with a friend, split costs, stayed in an Airbnb the size of a closet. I turned down furniture, turned down upgrades, turned down things that would have made my life more comfortable. And I put every excess dollar into a savings account I treated like a second job. And I handed it over. The deed stayed in my name. That was the arrangement. Lucas would pay the mortgage, hold steady employment for 24 months, make every payment on time, and I would transfer the property. I put the terms in writing, and he signed it at my kitchen table with a pen from a bank that had my name printed on it. He moved in the following Saturday. He texted me a photo of himself on the front porch with a beer, thumbs up. He never mentioned where the house came from, not once, not to anyone. Lucas met Priya Mehta at a work event 14 months after moving in. She was a structural engineer, the kind of woman who calculates load-bearing capacity before committing to anything, which makes what happened to her a particular kind of tragedy. She had a dry sense of humor, an apartment she owned outright in the city, and the quiet self-possession of someone who had built her life with her own hands and never expected anyone else to carry it. She was everything Lucas wasn't. She was also, for reasons I could not entirely understand, in love with him. Lucas brought Priya to the house on a Sunday afternoon. He walked her through rooms I had furnished and selected and inspected and insured and kept current on mortgage payments for 14 months, and he said, "This is home." She believed him. Why wouldn't she? She was standing in a beautiful house with a man who was proud of it. The pride was real. Lucas was always good at inhabiting a version of himself that felt true in the moment, even when the foundation was borrowed. I met Priya once at a dinner at the house 6 weeks after they started dating. She shook my hand and said, "Your brother talks about you constantly. He says you're the reason he got his life together." I looked at Lucas. Lucas refilled her wine glass. The engagement happened under the maple tree. Of course it did. Priya posted a photo. Her hand extended, the ring catching light. The maple tree framing the shot, its branches spread wide like arms opening. The caption, "He asked me under the most perfect tree." I said yes before he finished the question. Her parents, Vikram and Asha Mehta, came to the house the following weekend. They flew in from Toronto. Vikram was a retired professor, precise and warm. Asha was an architect. They walked through the house with the particular attention of people who understand construction, noting the bones, the materials, the care in the details. Vikram shook Lucas's hand and said, "A man who builds like this builds for the future." Lucas said, "Thank you." He did not say anything else. I called Lucas that night. I said, "Tell her the truth before this goes any further." He said, "When the time is right." I said, "The time is right now, Lucas." He said, "You always have to make things complicated." I heard the click of him hanging up. 5 weeks before the wedding, I drove to Laurel Hill. Not to fight, not to threaten. To ask one more time, clearly, in person, with witnesses. Lucas, Priya, and Priya's sister Mira were in the kitchen going through seating charts when I arrived. I asked if I could have a moment with Lucas alone. Priya smiled and took Mira outside. I sat across from my brother at the kitchen table I had paid for, and I said, "She needs to know the truth before she marries you in this house." Lucas leaned back in his chair. "And what exactly is the truth, Ren? That you helped me out? That's not a secret. Families help each other. The truth is that this is my house. My name. My money. My mortgage. It's going to be my house. You're going to sign it over. I haven't decided that yet." Silence. Lucas looked at me the way he'd looked at our mother when she caught him in something. Not guilty, not ashamed, just calculating the fastest route out. "Don't make a scene at my wedding," he said. I said, "I'm not invited to your wedding." He blinked. "Just once." "Who told you that?" "You did. Last week. You sent a text. It's a small ceremony." Lucas, I own the building. He said, it's Priya's day. She wants it intimate. And then his phone buzzed and he looked at it and stood up and said Priya needed him outside, and he walked out of the kitchen of a house I owned and left me sitting at a table I had bought. I drove back to Greenville. I didn't turn on the radio. I needed the silence to be sure I was thinking clearly. By the time I reached my apartment, I was sure. I did not call a realtor first. I called my attorney. Simone Ekweme had handled my contracts for 4 years and had the organized fury of a woman who had seen every way a legal arrangement could be disrespected and had very little patience remaining for people who confuse generosity with ownership. I walked her through the situation in 15 minutes. She asked 3 questions. Is the deed solely in your name? Yes. Is there a signed written agreement with your brother? Yes. Has he met any of the conditions for transfer? No. Not the employment requirement, not the payment requirement, not even close. She put her pen down. Renata, he's been living in your house for 14 months. He's planning a wedding in your house. He's allowing his fiancé's family to believe he owns your house. I know. And he uninvited you. Yes. She looked at me for a moment with an expression that I've only seen on the faces of professionals who are very careful not to let their personal opinions interfere with their work. What would you like to do? I told her. She picked her pen back up. The notice to vacate was delivered on a Wednesday. Certified mail, signature required. Lucas signed for it himself. I know because the USPS tracking confirmation arrived on my phone at 11:08 a.m. with his signature rendered in that compressed digital squiggle that somehow feels even more final than ink. My phone started ringing at 11:24. I let it ring. It rang 11 more times over the next hour. Lucas. Then a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be Priya's sister, Meera. Then Vikram Mehta, who had apparently gotten my number from somewhere and called 3 times in succession with the determined persistence of a man who believes in resolving things through direct communication. I answered Vikram on his 4th call because Vikram had not done anything wrong and deserved at least a voice. Renata, I'm Priya's father. I think you know why I'm calling. I do. Can you help me understand what's happening? I told him. All of it. The down payment, the deed, the agreement, the 14 months of missed payments I'd covered from my apartment in Greenville, the disinvitation, the text. Vikram was quiet for a long time. He told me he bought this house himself, he said finally. He told me he'd been saving for years. He has not been saving for years. Another silence. Thank you for telling me, he said. I need to speak with my daughter. What happened next I know from Priya. She told me herself, 8 days later, sitting across from me at a coffee shop in downtown Greenville, both of us holding cups we weren't really drinking from. Vikram went directly to Priya after we spoke. He sat her down in the kitchen, my kitchen, and he put his phone on the table and he said, I need to tell you something your fiancé should have told you himself. Priya listened to all of it. Then she went to find Lucas. He was in the backyard, standing under the maple tree, looking at his phone. She told me later that she watched him for a moment before he knew she was there, just a man standing under a tree looking at a screen, and she tried to remember if she'd ever seen him look worried in any genuine way, and she realized she hadn't, that every time something went wrong, he'd had the same expression, calculating, not feeling, running the angles. She said his name. He turned around. His face, when he saw her expression, shifted into the performance of innocence. Eyebrows up, slight smile. Hey, everything okay? She said, whose name is on this house? The smile held for 2 seconds. 3. Then it did something she described as collapsing inward, like a building whose supports had been removed from the inside. It's complicated, he said. The deed isn't complicated, she said. I looked it up this morning. Public records. It took 4 minutes. Your sister's name, only your sister's name. She was going to transfer it. When? When I stabilized. Have you stabilized? He opened his mouth. Because you haven't made a mortgage payment in 6 months. I saw the bank statements, Lucas. You showed them to me yourself. You told me they were proof you owned the property outright. But those payments are your sister's payments. She's been paying from Greenville while you live here. He looked at the maple tree, at the white arch still standing from the ceremony rehearsal 2 days before. "I wanted you to see me as someone who had it together," he said. "I see you now," she said, and she walked back inside. The wedding was supposed to happen on Saturday. Priya called it off on Thursday. Not quietly, she called it off the way she did everything, with precision and without drama. She called the venue coordinator. She called the caterer. She called the photographer. She called the guests. She called her parents. She called her sister. And then last, she called Lucas. He answered on the first ring. She said, "I'm not marrying you." He said, "Priya, please." She said, "I'm not marrying a man who lied to my father about what he built. I'm not building a future in a house that belongs to someone else, and I am not spending my life being the person who covers the gap." She paused. "I think your sister has been covering the gap long enough." She hung up. Lucas called me 40 minutes later. I picked up. He didn't say hello. He said, "She called it off. I know. You did this. You did this, Lucas." A sound I hadn't heard from him since we were children. Something that wasn't quite crying but was close. The sound of someone discovering that the floor isn't where they thought it was. "I'm going to lose everything." "You're going to lose a house that was never yours." "That's not everything. That's a lesson." Silence. "What am I supposed to do?" "I don't know," I said, "but this is the first time in 10 years that question is yours to answer." I hung up. I sat in my apartment, 900 square feet, second floor, a view of a parking structure, a kitchen I navigated carefully because the layout required thought, and I held the phone and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, not even relief, just stillness. The specific stillness that comes when you finally set something down that you've been carrying for so long, you forgot it was in your hands. I listed the house the following week, not out of spite. I want to be honest about my own motives here because I'm a forensic accountant and I believe in accuracy. I listed it because it was mine, and because Lucas had made clear he wasn't going to earn it, and because I had spent 9 years building that down payment and 2 years carrying that mortgage, and I was 34 years old, and I wanted my money back. A young couple from Charlotte made an offer within 6 days. They had a daughter, 3 years old. They wanted the yard and the schools and the maple tree. I accepted. Net equity after the sale, $162,000. My original down payment had been $156,000. 2 years of Lucas's mortgage payments I'd covered out of pocket, approximately $38,000. So mathematically, I came out behind. But I came out. And sometimes that's the entire point. Priya called me the night the sale closed. I was sitting on my couch eating takeout and watching a documentary about forensic fraud investigations, which tells you everything you need to know about how I unwind. "It's done?" she asked. "Closing confirmed today. How do you feel?" I thought about it. Like a building after load-bearing work. All the same materials. Lighter structure? She laughed. "A real one. That's very engineer of you. You would know." We talked for an hour. About Lucas, enough to understand each other, not enough to keep circling. About her work and mine. About what it costs to be the person in a family who holds things together. She'd done it differently than I had. She'd chosen a career that let her be that person at work and not at home, but she recognized the pattern. At some point, she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Did you ever think about just letting it go, transferring the house and walking away from the whole thing?" I thought about Lucas at 17, driving me home from my first college class on a rainy Tuesday because my car had a flat and he came without asking what I needed. I thought about him the morning of our mother's funeral, standing in the kitchen at 5 a.m. making coffee for 20 people who would show up later because he didn't know how to grieve, but he knew how to do something useful. I thought about the maple tree, the way he'd looked at it during the showing I'd taken him to, the way he'd said Mom would have sat under that tree with his voice going soft in the way it only went when he let himself miss her. "Yes," I said, "many times. What stopped you?" A text with a smiley face. "Quiet." "Yeah," she said, "I think I know that text. The last thing I'll tell you happened 3 weeks after the closing. I was working late, genuine forensic work, tracing a fraudulent invoice chain through 4 shell companies. The kind of puzzle that requires a quiet room and no interruptions. It was past 9. The office was empty. My phone lit up. Lucas. I stared at it for 4 rings. Then I answered. He didn't say hello. He said, "I'm working at a restaurant, front of house. I've been there 3 weeks. I haven't missed a shift." I said, "Okay." He said, "I'm not calling because I want anything." I said, "Okay." Long pause. The sound of him breathing, of somewhere behind him, the low ambient noise of a kitchen closing down. "I'm calling because you were right," he said. "I couldn't afford to be wrong anymore, and you were right." I put down my pen. "I know you lost money on the house, Ren. I'm going to pay you back. It's going to take a while, but I'm going to keep track and I'm going to pay you back." I didn't say, "Don't worry about it." I didn't say, "It's fine." I said, "Okay, I'll send you the total." "Okay, 3 weeks is good, Lucas. It's just 3 weeks. 3 weeks is how everything starts." He said goodnight. I said, "Good night." The line closed. I sat in my empty office with the invoice chain on my screen and the city noise coming through the window, and I thought about my mother making her list in a hospital room. I thought about Lucas at 5 in the morning making coffee for people who were about to learn how to grieve. I thought about a tree in a backyard in Laurel Hill that was now sheltering a 3-year-old from Charlotte who didn't know any of this history and didn't need to, whose family would build new memories under those branches, whose daughter might someday sit under that tree and have no idea what it witnessed. Trees don't carry the weight of what happens under them. They just grow. I closed the invoice file. I opened a new spreadsheet. At the top, I typed what Lucas owes, running total, updated monthly. I'm a forensic accountant. I believe in keeping accurate records, but I also believe in the possibility that numbers, tracked honestly over time, can become something more than debt. They can become proof. Proof that someone tried, that someone showed up, that someone did the work of becoming the person they should have been earlier, one shift at a time, one payment at a time, until the ledger, if not balanced, at least started moving in the right direction. My mother kept her accounts in a spiral notebook. I keep mine in a spreadsheet. We both believed in writing things down. We both believed the numbers would eventually tell the truth. She was right about that. She was right about most things.